Hey, Richard, very excited talking to you today around RevOps. Welcome to the podcast. So, you work at Just Eat Takeaway, and what are you doing there? And tell us a bit more about yourself.
Hi, Cedric. Thank you for having me on this podcast. My name is Richard Veer. I work at justeattakeaway.com, and I work for the For Business department, which is
Mhm.
a new venture the company went on 4 years ago to enable employers to give their employees an allowance to buy food online or in store through a payment card.
Yeah, and I think that was an important shift for you because traditionally Just Eat is um, a B2C organization, a big organization, and then the decision has been made, okay, let's move into the B2B segment as well. So, what impact did this has on the organization, and maybe especially what was the role for RevOps in this?
Well, for us, it was very much like building everything from scratch. So we built this team 4 years ago from scratch. We now have three teams essentially. We have the product team that develops our product. We have sales teams in market, and then we have the third team, which is the RevOps team, which is the team that I lead. And for us, it has meant that selling to corporates is different to the typical target audiences that the B2C departments have been selling to restaurants or to partners. But selling to corporates, selling to HR directors or facility managers or office managers is a different way of selling. Therefore, we needed to differentiate our approach, and that is where RevOps came in to facilitate that.
Yeah, and we will go deeper into this in a bit. And let's start maybe from the beginning. When we look at RevOps, in my opinion, there's quite some confusion around what exactly is a RevOps. So, what is RevOps for you, and where does it start and where does it stop?
Well, initially we started out as a small team, and over the years we have grown, and now we are basically taking care of the full end-to-end journey of a customer. So my team consists of or takes care of three areas. One area being marketing and sales enablement and content. The second team is around operations, so putting in place the systems, toolings, and processes to make sure that our sales teams are as efficient and effective as possible. Including giving them the insights to be as effective as possible. And thirdly, the team takes care of business development, which is around how can we further strengthen our value proposition and enable our customers to get more value out of our proposition, and thus creating more revenue for us as a department while unlocking more value for our customers.
Yeah, that is extremely that's a very extremely wide scope. Actually, that you guys have. And how do you make sure that the three different departments are aligned with each other and then with the rest of the organization?
Well, given that I lead those three areas, it is quite easily possible to make sure that we are aligned. We use the OKR framework to make sure that we are working towards shared objectives. And working together with the sales team and the product team, we align by sharing the same view when it comes to our KPIs. That was essentially actually the first thing that we did as a department, making sure that we look at the business in the same way and that we have shared objectives, but we also measure our progress against those objectives in the same way and define those KPIs in the same way so that everybody understands what are we trying to do and how do we measure our progress against that so that we speak the same language. And that has been quite a good driver of our success and our alignment amongst the three teams, that we share the same language.
Yeah. In my experience, when you look at RevOps, it can degrade, I'm going to use the word degrade, into a pretty operational role, although it has a huge strategic impact. So how do you make sure that there is exactly that balance?
Well, I think it is about a balance. Like it's like being able to zoom out and see the bigger picture, but at the same time zoom in and be able to take care of the operational day to day to make sure that the revenue engine keeps running. So from a strategic point of view, we are also involved in defining what is our ideal customer profile, like who are the target accounts that we should go after, and providing the analysis and insights to justify the strategy and to give input to that strategy. And also looking at it from a marketing perspective, like how do we target those target accounts? How successful are we in penetrating those accounts together with the sales team? But at the same time, also doing the operational elements to make sure that whatever is needed to make the sales team more successful and more effective in their day-to-day, to enable them to do so, be it through providing them with the right content, or looking at the sales process and seeing, okay, is every single step as necessary today as it was when designing it initially, or do we need to change anything? And has the business evolved in such a way that we need to make changes to our processes? But also, like what I was saying, when it comes to the value proposition, there we take a bit of a longer term view and look at, okay, where do we expect the market to go to, and what do we hear from our customers, what they are looking for, and how can we further shape our value proposition together with product, to create future value for our customers. So it is very much a balancing act, but I guess it also depends on what you choose as a team to work on, and making sure that you are earning that seat at the table by providing the right insights and guidance on, okay, these are the elements that will help us to be more successful moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when we look at the value proposition, you said about shaping your offering. At the same time, market leaders also help shaping the market. Are you as RevOps involved in this as well?
Very much so. I think, given the category that we are active in, we basically provide meal programs for corporates. And of course, due to the changes that we see in market with hybrid working surfacing, with talent being scarce, that makes that the market is changing directions as well, and we need to evolve and try to capture those changes as best as we can. So that is something that we are very closely involved in, but of course together with our peers inside product, and hearing it directly from our sales colleagues who speak to our clients on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And then when we look at the shaping of the market, then we come to a total addressable market. Are you involved, or how are you involved into target setting for the coming period?
We set the targets, like within our team. We look at past successes, and of course, given the nature of our business, and given the maturity that we are in, we are looking at multiple factors to determine, okay, how should we set the targets for the quarters moving forward? But we look at, okay, how big is the total addressable market when it comes to the types of accounts that fit our ICP profile? How many employees do they have? And based on previous experience, how much is addressable for our proposition to capture within that market? And based on that, we look at what are our financial goals at the end of year? How do we break that down to a target that we give to sales? But at the same time, also looking at what is the capacity of our sales team, and how big can a book of business be, and trying to balance between being ambitious, but at the same time making it attainable as well, to keep on driving momentum within our team, and to continue driving success.
Yeah, exactly. And that the goals are stretchable, that people can overachieve, and that it is attainable. So salespeople are not getting demotivated. So I worked in a couple of scale-ups, and I was always surprised that the targets we got, they were, let me say, pretty interesting. We had double-digit growth per quarter, and we always managed to reach them. Okay, and big amount of the times we absolutely managed to reach them and overachieve them. So for me, that's an extremely crucial skill, where you need to know the momentum within the organization, as well as the analytics, as well as the predictive aspect of target setting. When we talk here about starting up and scaling up, in what way is this a skill you need to learn or you need to have from the beginning, that target setting, in your experience?
I think it very much starts with understanding your customer, like understanding what is their behavior, and at what point in time during their life cycle does their behavior become predictable.
Yeah.
So in our case, with our product, there is a certain time frame within which the ramp up of usage is done,
Yeah.
and people start to have more predictable behavior. So understanding that, plus understanding and segmenting your customer base into based on certain characteristics, a certain company falls within a particular segment that shows this particular behavior, you are able to determine how your existing customer base is starting to behave. And by looking at new business and defining the KPIs, defining a sales process, you can start to understand how is my sales team creating a process around new business,
Yeah.
and how can we make that predictable? And by looking at, okay, these many leads are being generated, the lead to op conversion is Y, the win rate on those opportunities is Z, the sales cycle is X. You start to get those inputs that will help you to make a more accurate target as you mature as a company.
Yeah. And as a startup or as a scale up, when do you start with RevOps? When you start to have that first person in your organization, because we all know measuring is important, having the right data is important, building a process around it is really important. So what would be for you a good guidance?
Well, I think you should start with RevOps rather sooner than later. I think when you are a sales-led organization, making sure that your sales team and helping them understand where to focus on and after which accounts to go to, RevOps can already be of great value to your company. It can, of course, start small by providing the insights, providing the singular view on KPIs, and creating that monitoring cadence. Because once you have that monitoring cadence in place, you also start to have a performance driven and a data driven approach from all around you. Yeah, to drive your success. So I think you can start really small, but I would start almost already from the beginning. As soon as you start to get some like initial traction and start to get the feeling that certain customers are making more use of your product than others, then trying to understand, okay, what type of customers are making more use of your product, the salespeople that have acquired those customers, to what extent can you make a process out of their way of working? That is when the importance of RevOps to further scale those processes and also to further scale those insights, will become more and more important and will be of increased value to your business.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. So the question I ask is, if you look at the majority of the companies here, they're SMEs. Not everybody has the bandwidth to hire unlimited amount of people. So when we look at it from a different point of view, right? So we have salespeople, we have marketeers, we have revenue strategy, we have revenue ops. How do we look then if we have enablement, if it's not under RevOps? So how do you collaborate with each other? How do you make sure you come to one strategy? There is the right handovers, the right collaboration, the right input. What would be like a right setup in this?
Well, I think it starts with aligning on what we call like your North Star metric. Like, what is it that we are trying to do? How can we break that down into strategic pillars? And once you've identified those strategic pillars, then working together with your team, or if you are a one person RevOps band, working together with your sales stakeholders, your product stakeholders on, okay, what is it that we are trying to achieve, and creating objectives around that. Once you have identified those objectives, what are the tactics and strategies that you will implement to achieve those objectives? But having a regular rhythm of business where you discuss, okay, how are we performing and how are we progressing against those initiatives that we've identified that we will do, you will start to get that cross-fertilization by hearing different perspectives across the business, which will then will be inputs to further fine-tune your strategy. So within our team, we work in that way, and have a quarterly planning cycle, for example, to determine, okay, what are we going to be doing in the period moving forward.
Yeah, I like it. Then while I was talking, I was thinking about the governance, because there are a lot of people involved, and within governance, and you mentioned it already briefly to see when you said, okay, we have to look what process we can do better. What we did today maybe is not relevant for business for tomorrow. Within the governance, is there some specific role that is challenging the processes and the target setting as well? Or is it within the group that people will give critical insights in how we can improve the overall vision? Is it formalized or is it informalized?
In our current setup, it is still relatively informal. But we are moving towards a more formal approach, by setting certain KPIs, by creating that rhythm of business where you have certain types of meetings that are recurring, where the topics are same. You start to create a level of consistency when it comes to interpretation of performance, and thereby you create accountability, and that almost implicitly creates compliance to the process. So by setting the process, creating a monitoring cadence around it, and discussing that with a rhythm of business, you almost implicitly create accountability when it comes to compliance to those processes. Now, of course, it is not as rigid as I'm now describing it, because at the same time, we are also prone to, as the market is changing, we also need to adapt to that. So still getting that, seeking feedback and understanding, okay, what is going wrong in the process today, and can we do a deep dive and treat it almost as a separate project to understand, okay, what is going wrong in this particular area, and seeking feedback from the different stakeholders to come to a solution. That is still something that we of course do.
Yeah. And when we come back to setting the goals, we just said about making them stretchable and attainable as well. I've spoken to quite some companies where goal setting leads to mediocre results due to politics and bottom-up approaches, where we say, hey, this is our pipeline, this is what we can do, and then we set non-ambitious goals, which is, of course, not the goal of working in a scale-up. So how can an organization, I'm not specifically talking to your organization, about your organization, of course, but how can an organization overcome this, that this remains a rigid process, regardless of any politics or influences?
Well, I think having a almost like a triangular approach to it helps. Like setting the target is not like a singular process. Like you have bottom up, like understanding, okay, what is available in the CRM that you're using, like what is visible in the pipeline, what do you hear from the sales teams in the field, what is their view on where we can stretch it towards, what do we need to achieve from a target perspective, and what do we see from our existing customer base and how they behave, and where do we think we can stretch it. And those three viewpoints ideally come together, and then you make a choice on, okay, this is where we think the target should be at. And at the same time, the incentive plan, of course, also plays a huge role in this, like allowing people to overscore on their target, and making those accelerators so appealing that people are actually not looking at a target as their final destination, but simply as a stepping stone towards larger earnings, also creates behavior whereby salespeople are intrinsically motivated, to overshoot and to really reach for those stretched targets, because they know that there is an incentive towards doing so.
Yeah, definitely. For me, sales always start at 100% OTE, exactly to hit those accelerators. So when we look at, we speak about the realities on the market. So not so long ago, we were in growth mode in the market. Today, we have a lot of companies that work on efficiency. So from a RevOps point of view, when we look at metrics to follow or to look at when we are in a growth mode versus on efficiency mode, can you explain a bit more into detail what KPIs to look at, what metrics to look at in different modes?
Yeah, like from our perspective, we look at how well is our pipeline performing from a pipeline velocity perspective, but also looking at, okay, on a revenue per account perspective, are we able to make that shift to larger accounts? Are we able to create more stickiness within our existing accounts and reduce churn, and thereby, and with taking all those metrics into account, increase the revenue per sales headcount? Like from an efficiency perspective, we look at that. At the same time, we also look at our tooling. Like if we look at our tech stack and the investments that we make there, do all the tools still help us achieve our objectives that we set? And is the adoption at the level that justifies the investment to it? Or do we need to reconsider certain tools? Like when you are in growth mode, you might take on tools that with progressive insight are not as valuable as you thought initially, and thereby you make a reconsideration on, do we still need this, or do we need to reconsider and divest in that area?
Yeah, clear. And then when we look at the evolution of RevOps as a role or as a department, let's first talk about the evolution. So when you started in RevOps, how did RevOps look like in general, and how does it evolve into, and what will it evolve into later on?
I think in many instances, including our own, it started very much focusing on the operations, establishing the CRM that we need, and architecting that in such a way that it enables the sales team to do their work. And then evolved into, okay, once you have a CRM system, what kind of insights can you derive from that, which is very much like high level performance metrics. But as you start to see that different markets perform differently, and marketing also has a role to play in driving revenue, and they should carry a revenue contribution percentage as their objective, you start to see, okay, we need alignment between marketing, sales, and the operations side. And I think where it will evolve to moving forward is, like, initially we've had very much focus on acquiring new business and growing new logos. But it will evolve also into, how can we make our existing customers more successful? How can we drive up usage even more? And that we will start to look at customer success with a more particular interest. And especially given the current economic climate, look at, okay, how can we help our customers be more successful when using our product, and how can we help them achieve their objectives, and how can we unlock more value to them, and help our sales team to drive more revenue from our existing customer base.
Yeah, 100% agree. And especially CS in all organizations will become much more important than it is these days. And how do you see AI impacting the role of RevOps?
Well, I think it is very helpful in many facets. Like it helps us do some of the more repetitive tasks much more efficiently. Um, Especially helping your sales team when they are doing outreach, for example, using AI to support their outreach, or creating like a baseline of content for them to add their personal flavor to it, but also doing account research, for example, using AI, will shorten much of the time that they invest on those non-selling tasks, but helping them at the same time to be more successful in their job. And as a RevOps team, figuring out, okay, how can AI become part of our playbooks? Yeah, it's still very much early days, also for us to use it. But those are the two areas which are very obvious areas maybe that we look into. How can AI complement our way of working today?
Brilliant. Thank you. And for the audience, the last question, what for you are the three things to focus on to start rolling out RevOps successfully? So maybe
I
it's
think,
part of a recap also what you said
yeah,
earlier, obviously.
no, I think the three things that I would focus on as a RevOps team is first start with the customer, like understanding your customer base. How do they behave? Can you segment them? And if you segment them, what sort of characteristics that are replicable and are usable also for marketing? Can you segment your customer base on, so that you can help your sales team to also focus on the right type of accounts? Secondly, I would focus on the KPIs. Like, once we've identified what are we trying to achieve as a team, and what are the strategic pillars that support us in realizing that objectives, how do we measure progress against those objectives? And how do we ensure that everybody speaks the same language, defines those KPIs in the same way, so that we monitor. So when we monitor those KPIs, we're not having a discussion on, yes, but how do you measure or how do you set this KPI, but that we're actually talking about the KPI itself and what has driven that KPI. And thirdly, I would focus on the process, like designing together, of course, with the input from the sales team, creating a process around sales. Like, how do we sell, and how do we enable and facilitate the buyer's journey that our customers have? And how do we create a process around that, and that we create clear steps for everyone to understand, okay, what are the different steps before a company becomes a client of ours, and what are the different steps, and identify what are the gaps from step to step, and where can we then focus on to improve a particular step. So I think those three things would be the first three focus areas for any RevOps team. Understanding your customer, understanding and having a common view on your KPIs, and three, setting a process that everybody then sticks to, so that you can also understand where to improve.
Brilliant. Great input there, Richard. And thank you so much for the very interesting conversation. I wish you all the best in Just Eat Takeaway and the evolution that your guys are going through.
Thank you, Cedric, for having us, and it was a pleasure to be part of this podcast.
Definitely. Stay in touch.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.